The room is dark. The only light is the nervous glow of candles. You hear a slow heartbeat on a drum that isn't there, a deep, resonant thrum that feels like it's coming from inside your own chest. And a hand slides a roll of parchment into view. The paper is crispy at the edges, scorched in spots, looks older than anything you've actually felt in real life. It unrolls with a sound like dry leaves skittering across the pavement, and a tiny candle, held beneath that blackened paper, reveals the words long since hidden by ancient mages. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan, and today we are creating an ancient map for your D&D campaign. Welcome to the November Map Making Challenge. Every day this month I'm going to be creating a new video on a new world building topic to fill out the world of Requield, the collaborative community world building challenge that we're taking on. I've taken a small portion of the world, and every day this month I will be coming out with a new video and a new map. And today is day 9. We are almost a third of the way through, can you believe it? And today I am making this ancient map of Ahnakos. Now, so far in this series, I've mapped several locations in the fictional land of Ahnakos, several different sites and viewpoints in the enemies that you can meet along the way, and it's been an absolute joy. But so far, I have not yet created a map of the actual landscape of the realm that I'm exploring, and that's on purpose. I'm going to visit that much later in this series when I have a greater understanding of the themes that I want to explore and all the points that I want to add to this map. This map is an overview of the geography as a whole. It's going to allow me to put some mountain ranges on there and lakes and rivers and all of that jazz, and I'm very excited to do that. But this is also my opportunity, more importantly, to add some history and create a prop piece that is going to allow my players to explore their place in history and the direction of the campaign. In earlier videos, when I explored specific sites in the world, like the Gates of Night, or the Temple of the Knight's Veil, or the Broken Garden, we talked about how using those individual points would come together later to create a much longer campaign trail for players to follow, probably quite high, considering that the Gates of Night are guarded by a CR 18 creature. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start on that journey, and we're going to create a prop piece to help guide your players through what they expect to do. We're going to create a map which is both culture and geography and prophecy. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with an A3 sheet of 180 GSM cold press watercolor paper. Now remember that you do want to use a thick paper for this because we're going to be soaking it first. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a nice big pot of tea, and we're going to soak this sheet of paper in it. Now you can use coffee, and in a previous video, not too long ago actually, when I made a pirate map, I also tested out the fact that you can use soy sauce as well. We're going to soak it overnight and make sure that it is dried in front of the heater before we begin. And then we're going to get out a palette of high intensity watercolor pigments. All the materials are in the description below. And then we're going to start by sketching out the broad sweeps of the continent. Now, I of course have also done the map of the world itself. That's how we started this challenge. So I'm just going to use that as the basis, and here and there going to add the bones of where I want the islands to be. When you're working with watercolors for the coastlines of any given map, it is important to remember that watercolors are not a very exact tool. They can be in the right hands, but overall as a tool, generally not. That's what we've got fineliners for later on. But that means that if you are sketching out a landscape and you're not intimately familiar with it, and you don't want to take hours and hours to make sure it's exactly perfect, you're going to have a bit of distortion and a few mistakes, which is why it's perfect that we're doing an ancient map here, because those mistakes can absolutely be forgiven as being, the artifacts of a culture that's a couple of millennia old. As we go through and we do the outline of the coastlines, we add in a couple of lakes and a few islands. Once it looks good, we can then start with the fineliners themselves and do the coastlines. And that's very simple. And this is a great trick, I think, to give your coastlines the feeling of being real. If you use the watercolor to, give yourself a few unintentional, bays and spills and leaks and, drips, then you can use the Fineliners to make that look a little bit more jagged and real, and that makes it feel much more natural. And as we go through, you can see that I'm really leaning on a color palette for this one. It's an ancient map. We want it to feel old. The paper is already browned by the tea. We're using brown watercolors here. When we go through and do the C's, I'm going to use a brown Fineliner pen, and the only other color I'm going to use is, of course, is the black that I'm using for the labels in the Fineliner pens, with one specific exception, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. We've got several layers to any map, and this one has several as well. So let's go through them. The first one we've already done. That's the colored crinkled layer. That is the outline of the coastlines and the watercolors and the aging on the paper. If you want to make it particularly old, you can burn the exterior as well. Or you could even use salt crystals while you're letting the tea or the coffee dry to add a few imperfections into what it looks like in the end. That's just a simple trick of doing that. I'm not a huge fan of either of them because I find that the salt changes the texture of the paper, and I just don't like setting fire to my maps. Just call me weird like that. However, those are definitely options for you. And once we've done that first layer, which is the color layer, we come through and we add the details and the information. And that's the stuff that the ancients will add to the map in order to make it functional. This is the point where I actually start thinking about the geography of the landscape, because I haven't done that so far. And I place in a few names and roads and villages and flesh out a bit more of the culture. So you can see on the map, I start sticking down where, for instance, Tanaloon is. That was the second map that we did in this series. I'm also going to add in Divinada, which is the old name for the ruin that is now the Hollow Crown. I'm going to add in Kapos, which is the Greek word for garden, because as I mentioned in the first video in this series, each of the areas in the world came with a linguistic and cultural prompt, and the prompt for this one was ancient Greece. So I'm going to use that language and mythology as the basis for building this out. I'm also going to add in a Koroman's spire, because we did that earlier as well, and otherwise just kind of explore the world using ancient Greek words and structures to kind of feel that out a bit. I don't want to add too many details because, again, the other way to make this place feel old is to have a lot of the map feel unexplored or filled with wilderness. So on the right hand side, I'm just going to add in Greater Myr, where only fools and heroes go, and that's going to spare me, the map maker, from thinking up too many names and give the map the feeling of being quite old. It's going to give me the opportunity as well to map out a few things that are coming up. So I have a list of things that are prompts for what I'm going to be creating as we go on. For instance, I'm thinking of doing a map of a merchant city. I'm going to stick it down. It's going to be called Eglarond. I'm going to talk about doing a city of the giants, which I'll stick down here, as well as the Mount Moot, and I might do a couple of city maps, which I'll stick as well, and I'll just choose them later on. And so that's going to give me a guide. But doing an ancient map as being the first map of your world is something that I would definitely recommend, because it allows you to change things over time and explore how things do react to disaster or social changes or invasions and things like that. It gives you a shape of the world physically without you needing to fill it out with too many details. And then we come to the final layer. Once I've done those Fineliner pens, and then I go through and I do the grid lines, and it looks pretty good. Now, if this were an ancient map and that's all I was doing, I would add in some illustrations like I did on my pirate map. You know, some oldie-fashionedy, ships or monsters in the corners of the map. However, I want to use that area, so I won't be adding illustrations in at this point. Instead, once I finish the Fineliner layer, which is the second layer, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add in a prophetic layer. So now we get into the purpose for actually creating this map. This map is not just, a fun little aesthetic exploration of the world. This is a handout that I'm going to give to players. And yes, they can use it as, what is more or less an accurate map of the world if it does not have the details of the cities that are currently on there and the names are all mixed up. It is, however, what is going to lead them on a quest that I am going to construct over time. Now, much earlier in the year, I created a whole video series in which I explored these elemental ink pens and the Moonlight ink pens, which I brought back in other videos as well, which are a UV activated pen. But these ones are activated by heat. So if you write on your maps or your documents using these pens and then you expose it to heat, then the ink disappears. And then if you cool it down again, say in a fridge or a freezer for a few seconds, then the ink will reappear, allowing the message to be read. It is absolutely very useful for D&D handouts if you want to use them for that, and I absolutely would recommend it, and it is perfect for this map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this map and I'm going to add in the details of the prophecy using these pens. And more than that, because there's different colors of them when you buy the pack, I'm going to highlight where in the world they will need to go in order to find the various things that the prophecy talks about. So for those of you who are interested, who are following along with the plot, we know that there were two ancient creator gods long ago and they fought and one of them died. And in the end of the world, the first one will figure out how to raise the second one from the dead, and they will depart, and the world will be ruined in their absence. That's basically the prophecy, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the actual series of events is that will herald the end of the world, and what will happen after the fact. So I'm going to add in a few tasks for them. I'm going to give them a few things to do, and not all of them are going to be combat. So they will have to gather a few ingredients, a few items, a few artifacts, but they will also need to act as emissaries between the giants and the dragons, who are hereditary enemies. And I'm going to give them some clues as to where they need to go. So this is going to highlight several of the spots that I've not only already created, but I'm planning on creating in the future, like exploring the connection between the dragons and the giants, or dealing with, a necropolis, for instance, or finding artifacts in a warrior city. Things like that that are going to help us to create this quest line. When you're creating a prophecy, again, that is a whole line of thought that isn't necessarily in this, but I will talk about it briefly so you can add it to your own maps. What you've got to do is figure out what the plot points are, and don't worry too much about how they are connected. So if you give, for instance, as I've done here, 3 separate items that they need to gather, and you tell them where the location is, don't say anything about how they are guarded or what will happen. Give them, for instance, 3 different signs that the time is approaching, different events that they could have been privy to or even been affected by, like separate wars, kings being crowned, or natural disasters, things like that. Those are how we know what is about to happen is about to happen. Then tell them that they need to accomplish a certain list of tasks in a certain order. Don't give them a time limit, because that will come to bite you later, but just tell them this needs to happen, and then this needs to happen, and then this needs to happen. And then you talk about the consequences of their actions. Give them an either or. Nice and simple. Either they succeed and life continues on as it has been for the last several thousand years, or they fail and an angry god wakes up and starts destroying the world. Nice and easy. Don't get too much more into detail than that. If you want to couch it in, first person, or you want to talk about it in language like you would find in, the book of Revelations, then absolutely do that. But the more detail you give, the more difficult it's going to be for you as the DM to juggle a lot of balls, and I am speaking from experience here. So please listen to the voice of experience in this particular matter. And so once that's done, what I am going to do is I'm going to take a candle and I'm going to erase that message so that you cannot see it. Don't worry, the ink is still there. All they need to do is put it into a cool place for the ink to come back. And that's fine. All I will do is I will give them the immediate artifact. And then once they go to a specific place at a specific time, or they ask someone what it means, then, they can do a ritual and the words will reveal themselves. And in that way, you can have a prop which gives them tidbits of information at a time. If you want to use UV ink as well for an added bonus, then absolutely do that. And I've found creative ways to use this elemental ink in the past as well for disappearing continents or illustrations that have more details or more specific instructions for people who are looking for treasure. And I absolutely can recommend those as an option too. You just need to make sure that the colors of those illustrations match up. All right, and then finally, we have this. Overall, it's not the prettiest map that we've ever done, but it's certainly one of the more functional ones that we have. If I were doing it again, I'd probably add a little bit more decoration into the borders of this map so that it didn't look quite so bare around the outside, because I think the way that it looks, it feels like there should be something around the outside. It kind of hints at the fact that there's a prophecy there. But hey, maybe that's helpful in trying to push your players in a specific direction. Let me know what you think about this map. If you enjoyed this tutorial, if you're going to make one of your own, tell me about it in the comments. Like this video, help it find more people, and get this series out to more and more viewers as you go. If you've joined me every single day, then I cannot thank you enough. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, day 10, which is a third of the way through this month. I'm not flagging yet, and I hope you're not either. So what we're going to do, tomorrow's challenge is this. We are going to create a traders map. And I've talked about trading maps in the past on this channel in tidbits here and there. This is the first map that I'm going to really focus on it. I'm going to talk about a few of my tips and tricks there. And we're going to talk about the details that we want to add in order to make it functional for you as a DM. So before you come in tomorrow, if you want to learn a few tips and tricks, absolutely do that. But make your own trader's map and ask yourself, what details did you add, so that you can tell me about it in the comments. You can share your maps, and if you get them in nice and quick, then I can share them on social media compared to my own. And I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you for joining me, and once again, happy mapping.